Okay, I think we are starting to taper off here. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. So welcome to the Stewardship Network's monthly webcast. Really pleased to be with you today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Stewardship Network, and really pleased, Bill, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you making the time and being here. The Stewardship Network, for those of you who don't know, is a 501c3 nonprofit with a national and international award-winning 20-year plus history. We serve geographically place-based member communities from the Great Lakes to the Pacific Ocean. We started out here in Southeast Michigan, and we've been expanding and taking our message of collaborative stewardship all across the country. We do these monthly webcasts. As I said, if you're new to us, we do these monthly webcasts each and every second Wednesday of the month during the Eastern time zones, noon hour, the Pacific Coast 9 a.m. hour. And we've been doing them back for more than 15 years. So back before we all got on these boxes and Zoom calls. And so drop a recurring event in your calendar for the second Wednesday of the month, and then check back with us and find out what our topic is of that month. But we've been doing these each and every second Wednesday, hundreds of these. And so really pleased to be here today with Bill Schneider. Our mission is to connect, equip, and mobilize people and organizations to care for land and water in their communities. And we do that in so many different ways. We mobilize through our member communities, and we make collaborative ecological stewardship accessible to all through all kinds of things: prescribed fire, invasive species work, habitat management, biological diversity work. We do strategic planning and organizational development for different groups. So we mobilize to keep you all outside. We equip you and remove all of the hurdles so that you all can be outside. As we say, we want to provide all kinds of different things so you can stay outside doing the work in nature that we need. And so we do that through our coordinator support and leadership. We provide all of the kind of backbone support. So we do event registration for our member communities and communication. And as I've said to so many people, like you could do a workshop on so many different topics. But if I said to you, you also have to organize it, register people, book the event, place and everything, you can't do that. But if we take all of those barriers away and just say, show up and then present on your topic, you can do that. And so that's the kind of thing that we do. We connect people. The connections are one of the most valuable things that we think we have and again, loving having the chance to be with you all here on the second Wednesdays and connect with you all from Duluth to Pennsylvania to California and beyond. So we really love the chance to connect with you all and share the information across. Our monthly webcasts are one of the ways that we do that. We have an annual conference that the 16th year that we're going virtual with for one more year. We figure we need to get through a COVID-free winter before we can do that. But again, we have so many different events. Last night was the Steward Circle. Bill, I bet you remember the Steward Circles in Ann Arbor that have been going on for 25 years. We've had a monthly stewardship discussion circle that happens. It used to happen at a bagel shop early in the morning, and then post-COVID, we had to shake it up a little bit. But they happen each and every month. Yesterday, we were talking about herbicide in restoration work. And so just a chance to get together and connect with people around these topics and explore them. As I said, the Stewardship Network Conference is happening. And February 2nd and 3rd, it'll be virtual again. And again, it's the most affordable event that can happen. It's $50 for advanced ticket registration. So I encourage you all to sign up and register for the conference. It'd be great to see you there. We've had one of the things that people have said about the virtual conference is they've said things like, only you all could pull that off at the Stewardship Network, a way to make a virtual event with these boxes feel really connected. And we've got networking opportunities. We have the expo hall. You can come and go in different session rooms. And so maybe somebody can drop in the chat the link to the conference registration, but a great lineup of people. And with that, I'm really pleased to be here with you all, as I said, everywhere from Walpole Island, Wuju, great to have you with us. Doug Jensen, great to have you with us from Duluth. Good to see you there. I want to encourage you all to make liberal use of the chat box and ask questions as I am about to turn this over to Bill. And again, really pleased to be here with Bill Schneider from Wildtype Nursery to talk about the economy and availability of native plant production. So Bill, take her away.
Okay, and
you share your screen and you steal it from me.
Okay. How's that?
That's looking great.
Great. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you, Rob and Bob, for the help making me feel a little bit more comfortable with the technology. I don't do a lot of Zoom talks, so thanks so much. I also want to thank Matt Demon and Matt Yeagman and Dan Gable for sharing some of their photographs with me and let me use them in this talk. I want to just start. When I prepared this talk, I really didn't know who the audience was going to be, and I was watching the screen. And I see many familiar faces, but I see lots of people I don't know. So I'm going to start with just kind of introducing not so much myself, but my business, Wildtype, which I started in 1996. So this is I think we just completed our 27th year. From the very beginning, we have split our time between producing native plants and doing environmental contracting, ecological work. So the services on the ecological side involved design work, floristic quality assessments, invasive species management, mapping, monitoring, and native landscape installation and maintenance. And we've done this right from the very beginning. But the nursery is what we're going to focus on today, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my nursery before I launch into all the other nurseries that are available and accessible to people here in Michigan and surrounding states. We're located in Mason, Michigan. For those of you that don't know where that might be, that's 15 miles southwest of Lansing. We operate approximately 14,000 square feet of heated space and about 8,000 square feet of cold frames and a lot of outdoor space. I don't know exactly the square footage, but it's probably an acre or two. We're growing trees. For those of you that don't know me, I'm not real tall, so that tree is not real tall. So that tree is under 6 feet. We grow shrubs, trees, shrubs, perennials, and we are primarily catering to a wholesale clientele. But we have, from the very beginning, provided access to retail customers, and this is a retail day. We have 11 of these seasonally, so 8 in May and 3 in August, and they're very popular, and we're busy, and we concentrate everybody there on a limited number of days, and then we get back to our wholesale work. What we do, and other nurseries like ours, is we practice something I call informally restoration horticulture. And I use this differentiation because it is different than other types of horticulture. The kind of thing we do is, I like to think of it as where population genetics meets horticulture, and I'll elaborate on that. What I really mean is that we are focused on the population of plants, not the individual specimen. Nurseries like Wildtype are propagating nursery stock with enough genetic diversity to create self-sustaining populations. This requires that the material we produce has an inherent level of heterogeneity. In all forms of agriculture and horticulture, homogeneity is crucial, except in this kind of horticulture. And I'll give you some silly examples in a minute. Traditional horticulture, homogeneity is really the key because uniformity is what is required. This is a good thing. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This kind of plant breeding and plant development has brought us higher yields and drought tolerance and beautiful uniform flowers, many benefits to this kind of plant breeding, but it has limitations in restoration. And for those of you who have heard me talk, I show this stupid slide for years and years and years, but I think it drives home the point that inbred genetic lines are not well suited for restoration. Canis lupus includes the gray wolf and the domesticated dog. They're the same species. Someone in the audience will point out they're different subspecies. I grant you that, but they are the same, come under the same species. And if it was your task to reintroduce Canis lupus to Isle Royale, no one in their wildest dreams would introduce dachshunds, even though it's the same species. This is a highly inbred line, has limited genetic variability. When you breed a dachshund to a dachshund, you get dachshunds. The genetic wild type, the gray wolf, may have individuals that periodically have abnormalities, and they're quickly removed from the gene pool. Having this open breeding in plants would be open pollination is crucial to creating self-sustaining populations of plants and animals for that matter. So traditional horticulture really draws upon, I'm going to draw some distinctions between these two things. Traditional horticulture draws upon plants from all over the world. It's not restricted to native plants. It's commodity based. And even though many cultivars and name varieties are patent protected, once you acquire a license to grow those plants, many suppliers can provide them and distribute them nationally. And therefore, your product is really not that different than anybody else's genetically. The market's big. It's national or at minimum, a large regional market. And the market demands, it asks for larger containers. That's not necessarily done with horticulture in mind. It's an economic thing. And there is a reliance on named varieties and improved cultivars and improved varieties because there needs to be patent protection. These plants also provide all kinds of benefits, uniformity and things that people desire. People also want to see something new in their garden centers every year. These plants, in general, there are exceptions, are not intended for naturalizing. The idea is not for you to plant petunias around your house and then to spread all over your yard and your neighbor's yard. They're meant to be planted and to stay put. By contrast, the restoration-based model that we use and many other regional nurseries use is that our work is project focused primarily. Our customers come to us, they're doing large projects like the pictured here. This was for a mine reclamation. This is 4,000 oaks for one project. Genotype is critically important in this kind of restoration horticulture. These plants are mostly, but not exclusively, used to be naturalized. The idea is to put these plants back into the environment, let them cross-pollinate, reproduce, and make more. That is not to say that native plants don't have a rightful place in ornamental horticulture, because they absolutely do. In the kind of horticulture we practice, we're producing our plants generally in smaller containers because our clientele needs them in smaller containers. We have to produce them at a lower price and in a way that can be moved around inaccessible sites like wetland mitigations and inaccessible locations where they're used. This sort of business, at least from my perspective, has a broader seasonal window. If you're in the traditional horticulture, there's a season for spring annuals, and then it kind of drifts into perennials, and then there's a big lull in the summer, and you have a little uptick in the fall. Though we have this sort of ebb and flow in my nursery and nurseries like ours, the fluctuations are not as great. these project-based clients are requesting these plants all season long, from early April to into November sometimes. And just to continue these differences, there is a reliance on open pollinated material. And this open pollinated material, in our case, for our nursery, we are trying to do a lot of wild collection. So we are capturing and preserving and amplifying the heterogeneity that's found in the natural gene pool. Our sources for this material is ever decreasing, and that is of concern. That's actually a subject of another talk. So I'm here today to really talk about, is there a shortage of native plants and seed? And if the answer was black and white, there would really be no talk here. So the answer is not so clear. People come to the nursery in the years I've been involved in this work, and I often hear this: why isn't there more native plants? I can't find what I want. Why isn't there a native plant producer in my community? And early on, I may have agreed with these folks. I am generally not necessarily in agreement with this idea that there is a shortage, but specifically, there are some shortages and voids in the market. So I think it's important not to look at the market as one thing, but it's a lot of things. So we have, from my perspective, we have retail customers, primarily homeowners. We have various types of contractors, conservancies, universities, schools, governmental agencies. Each has a different set of plants they're looking for, sizes, timing. These are very different markets. Layered on top of that, there are many types of nurseries. There are nurseries that specialize in certain things, maybe woody plants or perennial plants or aquatic plants. So the market is not monolithic, and it's not particularly informative to just lump all of them together. One thing about this idea that there is a shortage of native plants, or perceived shortage, at least in my view, is that nurseries are in business to stay in business. And once the demand is met for the season, you have to do something with the material. You either have to overwinter it or do something with it. It has a shelf life, and nurseries will never produce enough plants to meet all demands all the time, because it would create a necessity to so overproduce that it would put them in economic peril. So there is a certain, to use an analogy, a governor is a small engine, has a governor that controls the throttle. There's a governor on this kind of production of living things. There are always going to be specific shortages at any given time for any particular species. And this is true of all types of plants, native and non-native. We occasionally have to search out non-native or cultivars for plants on projects we're replacing plants for, and it can be incredibly difficult. And we have to go to the ends of the earth to find these plants, not native plants, but non-native plants. So this isn't a unique problem to natives. Where there are shortages is there are certain things that are just very hard to grow. Things like ferns and ephemerals and aquatic plants. This is a place where there is great opportunity for enterprising horticulturalists, but also great challenges. These are hard things to grow. They take a long time. They, in some cases, take very, very specialized infrastructure. And there are nurseries out there that are pushing the bounds of producing these kinds of plants. this is an area where I would agree there is a shortage. Now, the supply and demand issue for these plants is somewhat baffling to me, because we are always trying to offer a greater selection of plants, but the market is not receptive. This will probably run counter to many of you listening to today who are saying, I wish there was more availability of more species. But when in doing this for so many seasons, we know that there is really a limited number. It can be expanded, but it's not expanding by leaps and bounds. We have about 1,800 species of plants native in Michigan. Wildtype is growing about 300, and maybe there's another additional 100 that are commercially available in Michigan, and that might be an overestimate. I think if you were to ask other nurseries, they would find something very similar. We say that 70% of our sales are really made up of only 30% of our species. This is something that we're always trying to expand. Our customers, particularly are the engineers who spec these plants, landscape architects, consultants, and contractors. They are not using all the crayons in the crayon box. They're just using very, very few plants. They are risk adverse. I get that. Our retail customers are overall very sophisticated, knowledgeable, and willing to try anything. But the retail market, for us at least, is not that big. So it doesn't allow us to grow hundreds of flats of any one species based upon just the demand on the retail side. So where do you get these plants? There's a perceived shortage of native plants. There must not be a lot of places to get these plants. Well, I will push up against that a little bit. I encourage all of you who are not aware of the Native Plant Guild to go to their website. This is a network of Michigan native landscape professionals, and in this list that they have on their website includes growers as well as contractors and designers. This is a curated list. It's a vetted list, and it's a good list. This organization has been around for about 5 years. I believe we are we have recently joined, been invited, and happy to be part of the guild. But this list is highly abridged. Now, there's my list. My list is still abridged. It is unvetted. It's just my list. It's just me at my computer adding people I hear about or people who we do business with to a spreadsheet. And I would be happy to send this list to anybody that would like it. You can email me at the end of the talk. I'll give you my email address. But let me just give you a few caveats, and I'm going to read you. It may be too small on your screen, but I'm going to read you what I write at the top of this. This is a list of Michigan-based businesses that focus on native plants and seed. This list was compiled by me, Wildtype, but is not an endorsement of any business. I apologize for any errors or omissions, and if you see any errors or omissions, please let me know. These businesses some of them are growers, some of them are resellers, others are both. Not all businesses are focused on local or regional genotypes. Some of these businesses grow, in addition to native species, other ornamental plants and cultivars. The take-home message is, when you contact a grower or reseller, ask them about the genetics if that's important to you. If it's not that critical, then don't worry about it. Each one of these growers takes a slightly different approach to the genetics of their plants and what they're calling native. Are they regionally native? Are they native to a particular part of Michigan, to the United States? Ask a lot of questions. So here's my list. So we talked about the guild's list and my list, but this list is by no means complete. It does not include nonprofits like Plaster Creek and Otsego Conservation District. It doesn't include conservation districts that hold sales that provide native plants. It doesn't include nature centers and wild ones who hold sales around the state. It doesn't include bare root producers like Alpha and Ingalls and Vance Pines. There are a lot of places to get native plants. And let's not forget to mention some of the really important sources like Cardno, which is now Stantec, Possibility Place, Woody Warehouse, Spence, Ernst. I could go on and on and on. These companies, these out-of-state companies, are important providers of plants to projects in Michigan. Many of you, myself included, would prefer to source these plants in Michigan, but sometimes it's just not possible. Which really brings me to this point, particularly with our wholesale clients. I cannot think of a single time in the time I've been in business where a project was unable to be done because you couldn't find the plants. These plants are available. They may not be available at your doorstep. For our retail clients, there isn't a native plant producer in everybody's neighborhood. They are not available at every big box store or garden center, but they are available. I took my list, and again, it's abridged, and I just was curious how these businesses distributed around the state, and you can see that they roughly approximate the population centers, and they don't mirror really where the commercial horticulture is centered, like around Kalamazoo, Comstock, and West Michigan. They're centered around the Detroit area, some in the Lansing area, and in Northwest Michigan, few in the UP. Agriculture is, I believe, the second largest economic sector in the Michigan economy, and floriculture and horticulture make up a very large percentage of that. They're huge drivers in Michigan, and for those people who are not accustomed to thinking about how big this is in Michigan, Michigan is a big player in horticulture and in agriculture. Now, I spent hours putting together this very complicated pie chart here to just make the simple point that if this pie chart represents the mainstream nursery and landscape industry, that's the horticulture, floriculture, all the people who mow lawns, all the contractors that work in the landscape industry. It's big, it's bigger than horticulture and floriculture together. If you were to try to put the slice of pie that is made up of native plants and seed, it would be so infinitesimally small you wouldn't be able to see it. And that's the point of this slide. As people ask about this idea of supply, I will always say the demand is very, very small. From my perspective, we're busy. Sales are increasing every year. But when we think about the amount of landscape that needs our attention, it is infinitesimally small. We have a lot of demand that we need to create. Few trends that as I was looking through some ag statistics, two kind of jumped out at me, that there's about 600 nurseries in Michigan. This increasing number of native plant nurseries was not part of the ag statistic. It's completely off the radar of USDA ag stats and MDARD stats. But there are, because I'm keeping track of them on my little spreadsheet, a lot of native plant nurseries starting up. When I began in 1996, there was myself, and there was Michigan Wildflower Farms, Wetland Nursery, Nesta Prairie Perennials, and then quickly Designs by Nature and Native Connections came on board, Hidden Savannah, but a relatively small number of these until maybe the last 5 years. This is a really positive sign. Another interesting thing that I noticed is that statewide tree production is decreasing. And that is because labor is expensive in Michigan and the growing season is short. You can profitably grow trees in Kentucky, Tennessee, even Oregon, and ship them to Michigan and make a acceptable profit. This doesn't matter to me. We grow trees here in Michigan. We're growing native trees from native genotypes. And I do think that there is opportunity for more native tree production in Michigan. There are some other impediments to increasing demand, particularly on the retail side. And these may seem kind of silly, but common names are what we use with the public. They're easier to manage, easier to communicate. But if you don't have the plant in front of you, it's really, really hard to get someone excited about a plant called bladdernut or death camas, choke cherry. These are things that are not, were not developed by marketing geniuses here. The last example I have on here is kind of the reverse. The public has a very positive connotation with honeysuckle, but my clientele has a very negative connotation with honeysuckle. It's a common name. It has nothing to do with its taxonomic relationship, and this needs to be explained. Common names can be an impediment. I'm just going to show maybe one more slide, two more slides. I also think that one of the things that is not helping the native plant interest in the long term is our idea that we tend to go in droves to support very, very well-defined causes. Don't send me mean emails. I'm all for monarch conservation. I'm not saying that this is not a good thing, but there is so much interest in monarch conservation, for instance, and there are some other examples, and there's great market for selling milkweed plants. This is a good thing in the short run, but in the long term, we really need to be thinking about how important the whole palette of plants we can offer supports wildlife in general. So we tend to have a very commercial, charismatic orientation to the kinds of things we do. And as native plant producers, we need to use that to our advantage. So I've just very quickly kind of told you at least about my point of view, where I don't necessarily think that there is a systemic shortage of native plants, but the question is, do you think there are? And I will leave it to open it up to discussion. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Bill, and I can be reached at this email address. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, Bill, thanks so much, right? So fascinating. Yeah, and thanks to Chris, who shared Connecticut's list of native plant producers, and John, who shared Indiana's list, and to others. Bill, couple different questions. What about a couple different people wonder about big box stores? Do you sell to big box stores? What if big box stores got on board? What do you think about that whole?
We don't sell to big box stores. We have never had an instance where we had nearly sold to a big box store a number of years ago, but I don't see them in the short term becoming really a player. I'm not opposed to it, but they're large marketers and they have to have the ability to resupply on a weekly basis on real short term. This is true of all kinds of mass horticulture marketing. I've been contacted by some of the largest retailers in Michigan, not big box stores, but large retailers. And their thing is, you got to have enough plants on hand to supply us on a day's or 2 days notice. And
Yeah.
that's just not a model that's going to work with my nursery, but maybe there are nurseries that will emerge over time that will be able to work with that model.
Mhm. Another question that that Laura asks, how does Wildtype compare in size to other native plant growers in the region or the country?
Well, that's a good
I
question.
know, right? Yeah.
People are very, very coy about talking about their gross sales and reach. We are a significant presence here in Michigan. We're producing something like 200,000 to 300,000 plants a year. I would consider that when you look at us compared to our contemporaries in other states, we are probably on the low average in size. For those of you who have been to the nursery, you may say, gee, it's a fairly small footprint. Some people come to the nursery and say, gee whiz, you're really big, but I look at us as being relatively small. Certainly small compared to a lot of traditional hort, but we are a different model. We're growing in small containers. So the footprint we have does not really describe the production we produce. So I would put us into this small, the smaller side of, on the smaller side of average. We're not a small nursery, and we're certainly not one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. Yep.
But in Michigan, we might be the largest native plant nursery that focuses exclusively on natives. I think that's a safe thing to say. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that we are the largest in Michigan.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then back to the big box store, Jason from Cardno also talks about, says that, you know, the big box retail market doesn't really line up with the native plant cycle, right? So that's that whole piece of about in the spring, a lot of our native plants aren't coming out and aren't showy when so many of those big box store people want to see showy plants on the shelf.
That's exactly right. And we were just talking here in the nursery this morning. There are these techniques that you can use to get your plants to bloom at off season, and that's a thing that's taught at hort programs like Michigan State. It's good stuff, but companies like Cardno and Wildtype and Hidden Savannah and all the rest, we're not doing that kind of horticulture. So we are not catering to the big box store, but that isn't to say that if there was interest, someone shouldn't. I mean, there's no reason why you would want to exclude them. But Cardno obviously isn't interested in catering to that model. We're certainly not interested in catering to that model.
Yeah. Yep. Couple other questions. Do you grow for seed? Do we produce seed? Yeah, I guess. Yep.
So we do produce some seed, and we sell it to other suppliers. We don't produce a a pallet of seed that could be made into a mix.
Yeah.
So we produce lots of a small number of species, and then we wholesale them to someone else that then can put them into their mixes.
Yeah, great. And then Bill, a couple other questions about things like, what would be your recommendations? I think this person is in Detroit area. And where would you go? Where would you recommend going to look at native plants? Like, I mean, so there's the come to your nursery, right? So first of all, there's that.
Of course,
and then
that's the first thing you should
exactly the best option of all. But then what are other examples? And then I also would encourage people online to chime in with their answers to this question too, right? Like everybody's got, not everybody, many people have their favorite spot to go see spring wildflower, wildflowers or the fall flowers or one of that work?
So, one of my favorite places, and I think when you put this out to the group, they'll come up with a great list. But in Canada, there's Ojibwe
Yeah.
Prairie, there's Lower Huron Metro Park, which is one of my favorite places to go. I think Belle Isle is an interesting place. The landscape there is going through a lot of changes. There's, of course, the Udolph Garden. I'm not talking about the Udolph Garden. I'm talking about the natural areas. There are, Belle Isle is a quite accessible place. I know, I don't know if Cheryl English is listening, but Cheryl English is an accomplished horticulturalist and native plant expert, and she lives in Detroit, and she can tell you lots of little nooks and crannies within the city of Detroit where there are remnant examples of native vegetation. I think that public gardens are very important, and I strongly suggest making a trip to the Great Lakes Garden at Mathai Botanical Garden, not because I am, trying to say that Michigan State, University of Michigan is great and everything else doesn't count, but that garden is fantastic, and it's a great place to learn the flora. So when you go to a garden, what's beautiful about it is that the plants come with labels, and it's a good place to learn the plants, so that when you go out into the environment, you will then recognize those plants once you've learned them.
Yeah, and I would encourage you all to also, go online to our event calendar, and there are lots of events that end up being, kind of naturalist walks and hikes and things like that. And I love the whole idea of kind of calibrating your eyes and going out with somebody like Bill, who's leading a walk, or somebody else, and they can just point out things that they see in the environment that you might not notice at first, and then. Or it's the same thing. I'm not a birder, but I love going out with birders. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that flight pattern, or I didn't hear that. I didn't see that. So that's also a great
Let me
piece.
put a little plug in for Michigan Botanical Club.
Yeah. Great.
And I saw that Neil was on this webcast. I don't know if he's still listening, but I have joined, and I want to avail myself to go on some of these field trips where there are groups of people that can teach you lots and lots of stuff, and I think it's a great place to learn and meet people that are interested in native plants.
Yeah, and and if you're a Facebook user, there are some awesome Facebook groups that post really cool things, and it's a great way to stay informed too. Okay, Bill, let's keep moving on to some other questions. In terms of creating more demand, Doug asks, what advice would you give conservation districts to reach new audiences? Got any thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I think conservation districts have a really important role, but I also think that they have also historically created some confusion. So in their offerings, and I haven't been looking at their offerings as closely as I once did, but I think that when someone goes to a conservation district, they are expecting a certain amount of curation. So if someone goes there and buys fruit trees, they know that those fruit trees are not part of the native flora, and they're fruit trees. They're meant to produce fruit. But I think that that conservation districts have a very important role to play in communicating and segregating and differentiating native plants from all other plants. And some do it very well and some don't do it at all. So historically, this may not be as true today. And we're talking about something like 80 districts in the state. So we're talking about a lot of different organizations. Some have robust sales, some don't have such robust sales. They have a lot of bare root sales, which include lots of conifers. Some of them are native, some of them are not native. So I think districts could have a huge impact on increasing the level of sophistication, education in the community. some are taking, or some are doing that. And the Washtenaw Conservation District is doing an amazing job taking this education and marketing part very seriously, and promoting local producers and getting people out and getting them hooked up with suppliers. So there are some very good examples out there, and including the Washtenaw County District.
Yeah, that's great. And then I also want to just point out that folks are pointing out some really great places to visit. Blue Ridge Parkway, the Ojibwe Prairie again, and other things. So be sure to pay attention to the chat in terms of places to visit. So go there. And then also looking through here, Doug also points out that homeowners associations are enforcing standardized landscapes are a big hurdle for some of the residents. So that's that other challenge, right? I know of people who live in subdivisions, and everybody's got their very, very manicured green lawn, and they're the one person with a native plant piece in the front. And Bill knows this from a place that I owned in Ann Arbor, postage stamp, little native spot on Brook Street. And wow, it would just teem with all kinds of insects. And it was the coolest thing. And it was just this little postage stamp prairie that from plants that we got from Dave Warner's when he was researching germination rates and things like that. So I don't know if you have any comment on homeowners associations and them enforcing low impact, and they restricting low impact landscaping. So there's a New York Times article that Doug references there.
There's so much. This is we are, I don't know about everybody listening, but I swim with a group of ecologists and biologists and consultants, and we are not necessarily the best at dealing with policy and ordinances and things of this nature. We're not all that politically astute, but this is such an important thing. Getting city ordinances that are compatible with or accepting of native landscape. It's funny you just mentioned this, because just this morning, we had a little conversation with my county road commission as I was planting up native plants along our roadside, and they told us we couldn't do it.
Interesting, right?
Now, we've done this. We have plantings over a quarter mile of road coming up to the place, but we were doing another 200 feet, and the county came out and said, you're working in the county right of way, and you can't do that without a permit. And I'm not talking about planting right up to the edge of the road. Right. I'm talking about leaving a mowed strip. They have jurisdiction from the edge of the road 18 feet in. That's a long way. No trees, no plants, nothing. They're saying we can't do anything unless we get their permission. We're planting perennial plants. We're not planting trees or anything like that. It's a problem, and there needs to be a lot of work done in this area, and we need help from people who have these skills. Yeah,
it is. It's really true. And it's also, and again, just kind of that increasing that awareness. There's lots of great chat comments about awareness piece. A couple of people, I don't think we've shouted out Wild Ones yet, but a couple, Celia and Carol say, join your Wild Ones chapter. So look for, so Bill, I don't know if you want to do a little Wild Ones.
Well, yeah, I would love to throw a little love towards Wild Ones. Yep. These chapters around the state do a lot of heavy lifting. People contact us and they say, where can I find native plants? Where can I learn about using them in my yard? Wild Ones is the place to be. It's these chapters have a lot of really smart, energized people. There are chapters all over the state. They've been around for a long time. So look them up and participate. Easy entry, lots of benefits, and you don't have to be fanatic about native plants to get a lot out of membership.
Yep. Great. So then, Bill, we're coming up to the hour. I want to give people, we'll do a couple more questions, and then, so what about native seed collecting? But people are asking some questions about where do you do that, or how do you do that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I alluded to this in the talk that that collecting is becoming more and more difficult because there are huge expanses of the state where we really don't have access. But we do our collecting mostly on private land and on conservancies and other properties through agreements and permission. We have to do it responsibly so that we're not collecting protected species, of course, but also not overexploiting the resource so that we're imperiling that population to reproduce itself. If you collect a large percentage of the seed every year, that is going to impact that population from sustaining itself. So it is maybe the most enjoyable thing that I do. It's challenging. It's always exciting. It's hard work. But I encourage you to find some remnant populations, get permission, and be very, very conservative on how much seed you collect from that population. And I encourage everybody, lay people, retail customers. I know Jonathan Parker is on this call. He's doing some cool things in Ann Arbor, getting people to grow some of their own natives. Whether they are wildly successful or not, it's a super powerful, life-affirming thing to go out and collect seed, germinate it, and grow it. And those kinds of things have all kinds of positive ripples that run through our environmental consciousness. Collecting seed is fun, and there are opportunities through the DNR. There's opportunities, I think, through NAP, and other opportunities around the state. Contact your wild ones, DNR. I'm sure there are people on this webcast that can give you more information of places to go out as a group and collect seed.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Bill, how did you get started? Were you trained in horticulture? What'd you do? How'd you start Wildtype?
Never had a course. I'm not bragging about this, but I never had any courses in horticulture. So I grew up always being interested in plants and in agriculture. I studied agriculture as an undergrad, and I have always been interested in environment. And as you take a circuitous route in your life, some of us do, I have, I was able to bring my interest in environment with my interest in agriculture together in applying it towards the production of native plants and restoring the landscape. As Lisa knows, I eventually, in my 30s, went back to graduate school in landscape architecture, where I was really most interested in restoration. And for some people, they don't see the connection between landscape architecture and restoration. To me, it's intuitive, and that's how I have approached my career.
Completely agree. Very fun. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being with us today. Great to have a chance to catch up with you as well. It's been too long, little pandemic too long kind of thing going on. Really appreciate it. I want to thank you all online for joining us today. Amazing to spend an hour with you. I want to thank you all online who are donors to the Stewardship Network. These webcasts, these free online monthly webcasts happen each and every second Wednesday, as I said. But they don't happen for free. It takes time. Bob and Rob, thank you so much for your backdoor work on making this happen. And we currently have a one-to-one match. So for every $1 you give to the Stewardship Network, it will be matched. So $1 becomes $2, $10 becomes 20, 100 becomes 200, 1,000 becomes 2,000. So I encourage you all to go online and donate to the Stewardship Network. Help us keep doing what we do. As I mentioned earlier, the conference registration is open now, the most affordable. It's a great lineup of speakers, and look forward to networking and chatting with you there at the conference. So $50 for advance tickets, February 2nd and 3rd online. Everybody can come. We look forward to seeing you there. And as I said, each and every second Wednesday of the month, we'll be back on January 11th, and we'll be looking forward to talking with how you can support a healthy hemlock forest with Rachel Kapler. So again, I just want to thank you all online. Really appreciate your time. Bill, as always, so much love and respect for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Happy holidays. Happy New Year, and look forward to seeing you in 2023.